What's up, fam? Welcome back to Recap Kickback, where we chop it up about TV, movies, and music while being sure to highlight Black media any chance we get. I'm your host, Chappell, and this episode of Recap Kickback feels so right for exactly what Recap Kickback is supposed to be. We are going to be talking about the new docu-series called Hollywood Black, episodes 1 and 2 that are now available on MGM Plus. If you don't have MGM Plus, join the club, but get it so that you can watch this documentary docu-series. And with me, of course, as she is every week on Recap Kickback, it's Mari. Mari, what's good?
Hey, Chappell. I think if you don't have MGM Plus, but if you have like cable, it's included in like Xfinity packages. That's how I was able to watch it. I was like, oh yeah, I can watch this. So like I didn't know I had access to MGM Plus stuff. But I am so excited to talk about Hollywood Black. This is like the epitome of recap kickback. Like this is what we like created this platform for, like essentially to talk about like little known Black media, big Black media all in between. And as somebody who like offhandedly has studied film through like out my life, who's married to somebody who went to school for film, I loved everything about this documentary, so I'm so glad to break it down with the two of you. I even like that the title isn't like Black Hollywood, it's like Hollywood Black. Like I don't know, something about it just rings so well. So I'm excited to be here and talk about it.
Yes, and to your point, we started Recap Kickback as a way to highlight this media, but Recap Kickback started with seeds from another podcast that we used to host with our special guest here today. I say special guest like she's not always the special guest here whenever she comes, but from the days of the post-show recaps the Connect on PSR, we brought in Latonya Starks to talk about this docu-series with us. What's up, Latonya?
Hey, thank you for having me back again. I feel like this is home, so I'm glad to be here with my family talking about a family program. Like, this documentary is so good. It's like it's so right up my alley just in terms of what my interests are, but it also highlights just how many films I have not seen.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Like I feel
that.
like I was making a list throughout these first two episodes of everything I need to go back and watch, because even if you have like a formal film school education, which I don't, I only took like 2 classes I think in college about film for whatever reason, but even if you do have that education, it's not taught this way.
Exactly.
I mean, like the fact that the original Birth of a Nation is still taught in film school tells you everything that you need to know about why this documentary is necessary.
Exactly. Yeah. Throughout, I was seeing so many movies that I thought, oh, we should talk about that on Recap Kickback. I can't wait to get the chance to talk about this with Latonya and Mari. And then I also saw a lot of stuff that you and the two of us have talked about a lot. I saw a lot of parallels. And so throughout, I think one of my biggest stressors were, how are we going to put this in one episode? And so there's going to be 4 episodes of this series. We're doing episodes 1 and 2, and then we'll reconvene in a couple weeks once episodes 3 and 4 are both released to cover the end of the docuseries as well. So thank you for checking in with Recap Kickback every week, for subscribing to the podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is what we're about to do. And so make sure you click subscribe, recapkickback.com/subscribe. Hit that like button on the YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well to keep up with all the stuff we have going on Recap Kickback. This last week, we had Bel Air premiered season 3. And so Puya, my co-host from the Bel Air post-show recap, was able to join me to start off our first 2 episodes of season 3 of Bel Air. And so that should be available on the Recap Kickback page if you want to keep up with our coverage of that. Mari and I were joined by Asia Welch to talk about, I don't even remember, what were we talking about?
Tyler Perry.
Whose name came up in this. Yeah, Divorce in the Black, which I think we might have to touch on a little bit here as well. And then this week, we dropped Mr. Throwback, a review for Mr. Throwback on Peacock with me and Tyrone. So we got a lot of content on Recap Kickback for you. If you don't see something right now that you like, that tickles your fancy, come back in a week because we're going to have more content for you there. So make sure you subscribe and show some love, and we will try to keep that content coming. Now,
and Chappell, I just looked it up. Hollywood Black is also available on Prime Video for free as well.
I watched the first episode on Prime, and then the second episode was like, you gotta pay. And I think I ended up watching this. Yeah, I think I ended up watching the second episode on Apple TV Plus because I had a free week of MGM Plus with Apple TV or something like that. So I freaked it. But we're supposed to support this stuff with our Black dollars, and so I might not, end my subscription anytime soon. I might let it rain a little bit for Hollywood Black, just to show some love to these Black creators, because this was really good, and I think they deserve to be compensated for what we saw. Latonya, what was your knee-jerk reaction while watching this? So when you started the series, how were you digesting what we were getting, and then by the end of the 2 episodes that we got, how did you feel overall?
Well, I knew it was inevitable that we would start off talking about like white people doing blackface and how that kind of bled into Burt Williams and how he essentially had the first all Black cast of a movie that was scrapped, and it was just like left aside, written out of history for such a long time, until people found these random canisters of film and looked at it and realized like what treasure they had. So it started to make me think about just like how much history is lost, like film history in particular has been lost just because, like it's not in the mainstream. It was especially not in the like 1900s, like in the mainstream for there to be Black cinema. So the fact that they're starting it kind of like at the very earliest, like before talking films even, and talking about how, I think the thing that got me was when Justin Simien was saying all movies start with a Black screen and then they fade to Black. Like Blackness is always involved in movie making. And that just made me think and really set me up for the rest of this documentary. And then to see just like all of the people that they've gotten together, even in just the first 2 episodes, to sit down and have these discussions and not feeling as ignorant, because a lot of them were like, yeah, I'd never seen this movie or never heard of this person. It just, goes to show how much of our history has been lost or like people have tried to erase over the years. So I'm really happy that this is a documentary that we get to see and talk about now.
Yeah, I think it was on our radar, Latonya, weeks ago. I said, Latonya, if this happens, I want to talk to you. And then Mari messaged me and said, would I rather talk about Hollywood Black? I said, that's perfect. Because I was already trying to figure out a way that we could get to talk about this. Because I saw it coming. I know that it was based on the book, Hollywood Black, the stars, the films, the filmmakers, by Donald Bogle, and the foreword written by John Singleton, of course. And so I knew I knew that MGM Plus was about to take it off and run with it. And I had high expectations, of course, but I was pleasantly surprised with what we got throughout from beginning to like the end of episode 2. Mari, how did you feel watching it?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. Give me a concise history of something, well explained, well told, like I'm there. And this is exactly what it was from the beginning of talking about how like we are the first subject matter of film, the first few reels are a Black man on a horse, to like literally going basically decade by decade, starting in the 1900s, 1910, 1920, like just going decade by decade, breaking down the influence of Black culture on Hollywood, on the movie making process, how our culture is twisted and used for profit in Hollywood, how our actors and actresses were treated so early on. Like it was just amazing. I loved every second of this. Shout out to Justin Simien, who is the director, producer, I'm pretty sure writer as well, of Dear White People, both the movie and the show. I thought it was very interesting that he's doing this documentary, and I can't wait to get to the last 2 episodes, because I'm assuming, depending on how it's been laid out the first 2 episodes, that we're going to get to now and how it is like making movies now for Black directors. And Justin Simien is somebody who's faced a lot of critique and backlash for his work. So I'm really interested to see how they address that. But so far, I think that they have addressed a lot of different things and nuances and discussion topics about Black cinema from the beginning in the early 1900s all the way to 1980.
Yeah.
1980s.
Yeah, 1980s. Yeah,
80s,
Justin Simien put together a really good project here. Like you said, the director and writer of Dear White People. He's also an actor, but I was very impressed with the other actors and talking heads, as you would call them, Mari, that we got in this documentary getting interviewed. Lakeith Stanfield, Reggie Hudlin, Ava DuVernay, Gabby Union, Giancarlo Esposito. Yeah, I mean, all of these names, and I think that was another reason why I was so engaged, is because every time you take your eyes off of one scene, they put somebody else, another very influential person in Black film and Black media on the screen, and it makes you pay so much more attention because you know this person. We've grown up with these stars, these celebrities, these authors, these actors, and we're like, oh, okay, I'm paying so much attention to what you're saying, and they're going through this journey with us. You know, they're also kind of getting taken through decade by decade, film by film, and it was so much fun to watch. Did anybody stand out to you, Mari?
Definitely Ryan Coogler and his black eye. Yeah, I love him so much.
Like, Kendrick Lamar, the director, you know, like,
exactly. He's just so California. Oh my God, I love him. Erica Alexander as well. Man, I just love. God, I love her. We talk about her on here anytime.
Every other episode of Recap Kickback, we say, remember Maxine Shaw, attorney-at-law? We love her, don't we?
And then of course Issa Rae, an old friend of all of ours, you know, in our heads and in our coverage. So I thought all of the talking heads assembled were like perfectly placed. I want to get the name. I don't know if you've got it. I'll look it up if you don't. The name of the guy who said that he produced the Oscars.
That was Reggie Hudlin.
Reggie. Oh, sorry. What was Reggie?
Yeah, I thought that was Reggie Hudlin. You might know him. You might know him by the Boondocks making fun of him in the BET episode. My name is Reggie Hudlin. You know, like that's
what it was. Okay, because the reason why I kind of pointed him out and kind of wanted to talk about him is because like I thought he had some very interesting takes that aired on the side of like.
So did the Boondocks.
Yeah. Yes, he talked about how he was the producer of the Oscars, just so happened to be the year that I was like Oscars so white. So he had a lot of thoughts about like, oh, you say something so white, what are we supposed to do? Protest it? No, you go and you kick the door down for the next person and stuff like that. His takes were very interesting, very like NAACP adjacent. Like,
ooh, I mean, I'm glad you dropped those.
Don't get into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's go. I mean, we're here now. Let's talk about it. You dropped those famous letters, NAACP, Latonya. Ooh. I don't know if I've ever watched media that was more critical of the NAACP than these two episodes, because it felt like every time there was something that was going right, the NAACP was on the wrong side of history throughout. And we've even talked about that here on Recap Kickback and on the Connect before with, you know, when we talked about the color purple and several other things. The NAACP is often not on the right side of history when talking about Black media.
Yeah, Rustin, even that's not even media, but just on the wrong side of history.
They trying, bro. They trying.
So I think that it's like I washed it out of my mind. Seeing a picture of Walter White before.
Right.
Emphasis on the white.
Like 138th Black.
Oh my God, that was the funniest. Hattie Daniel, who was the first Black woman to ever win an Oscar. She won, obviously, the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, playing Mammy in Gone with the Wind, which is obviously a problematic movie. It's obviously a problematic like role, but it was among the only roles available for Black people during that time. They talked about like what it must have been like for her, because the place where they held the Oscar ceremony was an all like whites only ballroom, and so she was at the very margins of it, literally. She was segregated from everybody else, and how long the walk must have been for her to go up and get her award. And so, you know, she wins, and the NAACP is like, this is not, specifically Walter White, it's like, this is not who we want representing us on film. And she was like, yeah, when you stop being 132nd Black, then maybe you can say something, which is one of the most savage takedowns.
Wild. Cause I thought this, because they showed his picture. First, I was like, is that not a white man? I'm confused.
White, you know, like, oh, I get it. He's white. No, it's like, no, He blackish, and I think that's the problem, right? I think
Right.
his vision of the NAACP that they talk about is that some of these roles, the Mamie character, the servant characters, the cooks, the maids, all that kind of stuff that were reserved for Black people back then, that was not illuminating the type of image on Black people that the NAACP would like. And so they're like, oh no, we need better roles for Black people, but specifically roles that only light-skinned people could get. Right. And so this puts Hattie Daniel in a tough spot, because she's saying, I understand that you would like more representation in these a little bit more buttoned up roles, these more palatable roles, but at the same time, you trying to put me out of a job because you don't think I'm the right type of Black to put on the screen, and I just won an Oscar. So
and like
not a great
career essentially. I mean, her career was ruined after she won that Oscar for all kinds of political reasons, but especially like it definitely didn't help that the NAACP was like, you know who we want representing us? Lena Horne. Lena Horne is who we think is the better representation. And then they go into her signing that 7-year contract with MGM, which is like the first contract of its kind, but she had a stipulation in there where she wouldn't play any domestic roles, which was like unheard of at that time.
And Hattie McDaniel supported that
it.
Clause.
Yeah. I mean, it's so odd. And they mentioned the NAACP again in the second episode, when they're talking about The Color Purple and the backlash to that movie, which was literally an adaptation of a book, not like not like a sociological study done about all Black men, for example.
Exactly. That was
not all Black men.
Yes, that was so interesting. I did not know. We talked about The Color Purple here on the Recap Kickback, and right,
or the Connect or Recap Kickback. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I was like, when the three of us together, it's all the same. And so like we talked about that, and I don't know if I knew any of that, like the boycotting of The Color Purple and stuff like that, and them saying like, oh, this is making Black men look bad, and like
it came up in conversation for sure.
We definitely talked about it.
We did. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Because
perfect.
Well, because
but I didn't know. Seeing it was different. Should I just say seeing it was different. When they had footage of like the boycotts and stuff of Color Purple, they were questioning people on the streets about it and stuff like that. That was so interesting, and it's just kind of funny because we see that type of rhetoric today when anything really drops. It's just in the form of social media now.
Yeah, you're 100%. We have somebody who makes some Black art, no matter what that is, and then you have Black people weighing in on it. Some Black people will accept it, some Black people will push back about it, and we do that in a way here, Mari. We just talked about Tyler Perry's divorce in the Black. Tyler Perry's name does come up in this docuseries as well, because he is one of the people who is making his own films, also writing and directing and doing a lot of the production side on his own, and in a lot of ways, congrats, Tyler, as your empire. But on the other hand, maybe some new writing would spice up the place a little bit, maybe bring in some other opinions about these things, and we might get a better product. And so we have been critical as well of Black media, but I don't think there's something inherently wrong with that. I just think that when it comes to the NAACP, they make it a larger statement about Black folks than it has to be a lot of times, right? Like if the NAACP came out and spoke out against Tyler Perry right now and said, these are not the roles that we want Black people being in. Tyler Perry needs to be stopped. We're all boycotting him. Shut him down. That would be taking a hard stance against what Tyler Perry considers a big part of his audience in their enjoyment, and his Black audience, to be specific, and so a lot of the stuff that was happening back then, I could very well see happening now. It's just not happening because it's been done so many times, Mari.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I get that. And I mean, like we said, the NAACP itself has kind of a very, what's the word? Polarizing image, I think, within the Black community as well, because it's like, yes, I like that we have the NAACP Image Awards. It uplifts our community. It spotlights our community on stuff that like the Oscars won't or other award shows won't. But it still has an air of respectability politics around it that me and my Blackness just doesn't like to feel. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
the respectability politics for me is just too much sometimes, and to see that that's not a recent development, like that is something that seems to be ingrained in the organization itself, was very interesting to see here. Like I mean, I think one of the strong suits of this documentary is a lot of archival footage. God, I love me some archival footage in a documentary, man. Like, give me that time capsule, you know? The fact that we're getting like time capsule archival footage on events that happened back in the day, also being juxtaposed with talking heads from today reacting to some of the stuff that they'd never seen or stuff that they lived through. It's just like chef's kiss. It's such a good docuseries so far.
Yeah, I think the three of us, none of us have film backgrounds, but we watch a lot of TV and a lot of movies, and we do study these things closely as people who talk about them on podcasts regularly. So we really do come across a lot of this media, and we come across new media that reflects this older media as well. So I love the archival footage, especially when it came to some of the moments that I see reflected in the last couple decades, you know, where it's like, it's not history repeating itself, but it's people paying homage to the things of the past. One of the moments that stood out to me, Mari, specifically for you, because I know you, I don't know if you caught it, but they talk about Lena Horne, and they talk about the performance that she had for Stormy Weather. And my first instinct was, I wonder if Mari remembers the last time we talked about Stormy Weather. You got it?
Oh.
Think about Adina Porter in The Changeling, episode 7, where she stood up on that stage and performed Stormy Weather. Mari, I almost fell to my knees. I said, "Oh my God!" It was like straight out of the pages. I was done. It killed me. I love it so much.
That's so funny. You're so right, because I was singing the song, but I was like, I've never seen this movie before.
Check out our coverage of the Changeling on the Connect on Post Recap.
Yes.
I'm having a bunch of links in this notes.
Oh my gosh. Now I feel like I gotta go back and watch that episode too. But yeah, Stormy Weather, Lena Horne, that was great. Oh my gosh. So many references, like you said, so many references to great media that today is being not recycled, but renewed for new eyes like us. That's amazing.
Latonya, what was a part of the series that stood out to you about some of these past actors and movies that maybe you have seen?
Yeah, so we can stick with the Lena Horne of it all for a second. So after she made Stormy Weather, which would be a star turn for anybody else, right? And she would have so much work. She was supposed to do Showboat with Paul Robeson. And Paul Robeson is just a name that I know from my childhood. Like my grandmother had all of his records, and she used to play them, and we watched Showboat quite a bit when I was young, though I don't remember much of it now. Like I would have to rewatch it again. I just remember those songs. And they instead tapped, I think it was Ava Gardner, to play the role they gave Lena Horne, and just put her in Lena Horne's makeup, which is a story I remember my grandmother telling me when I was young, only because I've seen this documentary. That triggered that memory. So just that, idea is so wild. And then the idea that Paul Robeson was like the first Black leading man really in Hollywood, like mainstream Hollywood. But because he was outspoken about civil rights and like the treatment of Black people in this country, he was blacklisted. Like, he went before Congress and they tried to have him name names because they when they were doing like the communist roundups and all that type of stuff. So I don't know. I found that to be incredibly interesting because, I grew up like learning about all of these people like Lena Horne, Paul Robeson, for example, but not really knowing the ups and downs that happened to them in their career. So it's really great to see this documentary talk about what comes out of, suppressing a history or like trying to blacklist people, because they happen to be speaking up, even when they're in prominent roles in society.
Paul Robeson at Howard University, like we have a big acting curriculum in Howard. Like, it's well known. Chadwick Boseman's he went there, and our fine arts building is named after him now. You know, Felicia Rashad just stepped down as the head of our acting department, and we actually have the Paul Robeson Awards. It's a student award for like student filmmaking and student acting, and one of our friends, one of our old roommates, actually won the award for best actor in like a student film that like James had helped with. So it's like Paul Robeson is a huge, like a big name like within the Black community when it comes to acting, and there was still so much about his life I did not know that I thought that this documentary did a really good job of talking about. You know, I think the again, I might be repeating myself, but I think what this documentary does the best is it takes people and movies that we may know about, we may heard of, we may have watched, we may have not watched, but it puts us in the time and space when they came out, and we hear the reception about them within their prime in that period, and it feels like more than just you know, being told, but it's like Paul Robeson was one of the first like breakout Black actors, and then you see all of the different film roles that he did. You hear from all of the different experts about how him taking certain roles broke like the color barrier for some actors and stuff, depending on how you want to explain it. And it just really completely puts in perspective people, events, places, movies, in a point in time that you might not have just knowing the media itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really did contextualize not only how the media was being received, but also how it was being created. Because I know when the film talks about Burt Williams and how his depiction of what you would consider a minstrel show led to, you know, Charlie Chaplin eventually, right? But no one ever, everyone's always talking about Charlie Chaplin. You never hear about Burt Williams. But Burt Williams, the way he approached creating this character or these characters in blackface to appeal to white audience, they mentioned double consciousness as him letting people assume he was a fool, but in reality, he was playing them all to benefit off of them thinking that he was a fool. So he was leaning into their expectations for his own gain. And as Black people, we just find ourselves doing that a lot. It's like the typical code switch where it's like, okay, I got to get this check. So I'm gonna do this, and this. I'm gonna do it the way I want to do it, and I'm gonna do a nod and a wink toward the other Black folks so they know that it's happening. And so, yeah, from Burt all the way to Paul, that, you know, that will eventually lead to, you know, the Denzel Washingtons of the world. We just see how all these actors and performers start to pave the way for who's coming next. I don't want to get too far though away from the beginning, because I do want to talk about The Imitation of Life.
Yes.
And I want to talk about it because, again, this is another movie that I recently talked about. Bryce and I talked about Holiday Heart not too long ago on Recap Kickback for the end of Pride Month. We talked about it. And in that film, they're watching Imitation of Life throughout. And it's very much about a woman who is denying her mother and pushing her mother away because of the color of her skin, because she's dark skinned, and she doesn't want to actually live in a world where she is associated with that, because she wants to live in the privilege of being so fair skinned that she could pass. And I just thought that just even the way they explained The Imitation of Life, because you see it, but to see like these film experts and people, these actors and directors talk about it, and they talk about how she has the option to go downstairs and with her dark-skinned mother, but she chooses to go upstairs. You know, I was like, it's so incredible, because even now, we just talked about Holiday Heart and The Imitation of Life should not align like they do. But then when you watch them together and you see that there's so much overlap, I felt like this docuseries really highlighted how all this stuff is just paying homage to a lot of the things that got us here in the first place. At least that's how I interpret it watching that, because I don't know, I got a little emotional, Latonya.
Yeah, I got emotional when they started talking about, imagine what it must have been like for those two actresses, for Freddie Washington and Louise Beavers. who played the daughter and the mother. But just like, they made a point of saying that Freddie Washington was so fair skinned that she could have passed, but she did not. And so I got emotional thinking about what their offset dynamic must have been like. Because I'm sure like part of anytime you're making art or like doing any job, part of it bleeds into your relationship with those people in real life as well. So I just wonder what it must have been like for those two women to like navigate that set differently, or to like relate to one another and have conversations with each other about how to play, these parts opposite each other. But yeah, that story is so tragic. I also think it's really interesting that they discuss in this documentary how, people like Walter White wanted people like Lena Horne, people like Freddie Washington to be the people who represented Blackness on film. And that hasn't changed.
No.
Like not at all. Like I know Chappell, me and you, we talked about challengers on this podcast not long ago. And it seems like, I'm nothing against Zendaya. I love her and I think she's a fantastic actress. But like whenever a Black role for a woman is being cast nowadays, it's like the first person that they go to is Zendaya, as if or like a Taylor Russell, like, another mixed race woman.
Taylor Russell?
Yeah, she was in Bones and All, the Luca Guadagnino movie.
Gotcha.
But I mean, just like that archetype of person is still who represents Black women on screen, which was so interesting later. And I know we'll get to it when we get to the Blaxploitation era of movies and we start to see a variety of Black women and you see like what everyone in the diaspora looks like really on film.
Right. Because the series talks about how we cannot always judge the success or I guess the importance of Black media based on how much money it makes. And I think a lot of times, like you're pointing out, they try to choose a racially ambiguous Black person who's like, oh, it's Zendaya, she's a Black woman, right? So that works. And then it doesn't scare the white people away. They can still come and spend their white dollars without having to feel like they're supporting something that doesn't reflect them. Whereas we are always required to go in and watch stuff that doesn't reflect us because there's not as much media that we have. If we only watched Black stuff, we would be scraping, just trying to find anything sometimes. It would be so hard. And it's just like, it's not that it doesn't exist. It's not highlighted. And so you have to dig through all this other stuff to get to those hidden gems. And I think that in the series, they even talk about how at some point you have to just move away from that and talk about what resonates with you as a Black person. It's less about the money that it makes and more about the impact that's felt. But like you said, in Hollywood, they want money.
I think it speaks to our empathy as well. Because we can watch any story with anyone and identify with some part of it, right? Like sometimes very deeply. But it doesn't seem like, at least the perception in Hollywood is, you can't show Black people in the media and have white people identify with them. And like, why is that? Partially, is it just because, throughout history, we weren't allowed to be on screen as much, and so we kind of have to like look for people where we can identify with, whereas like whiteness has kind of always been the norm. I don't know.
They said it in here, like that's why those early roles were the mammy roles, butlers, domestic help, because through the white gaze of Hollywood and the white gaze of telling the story, that would be the only time they would interact with Black people as some sort of form of servitude. So it's kind of like, as we get further away, now that we are in the time that we're at, I would definitely ask that question now. It's like, can you see Black stories and can they resonate with you? And not only that, there's a thing about like, okay, there's stuff that's for like the Black experience. You know what I'm saying? Like literally stuff that is made for the Black experience, and it shouldn't be made for a white gaze, but it's always a point of contention to, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, also, we just want regular stuff. Can we just get black sci-fi? Can we get a black rom-com? Can we get like it? I love how that two sides of the coin is like, yes, we want black experiences on screen. However, we also kind of just, you know, want just regular roles, you know, you know what I'm saying? And you could see it in the way that Issa Rae was like, do we have to talk about the color purple? You know? So I just think this documentary brought up so many questions like that, like what Latonya asked, you know, so just very interesting to think about.
Yeah, we see a lot of what you were just talking about, Mario, where you have these two sides of the coin when it comes to representation. I think Giancarlo Esposito says, as Black people, we are pressured to do well because we are the representation for our entire race. Yeah. But when we do well, it's go us, you know, we did it. We're uplifting the Black folks. But if you do poorly, then we failed our entire race because we might be the only indication of what people are viewing Black people as. They keep saying throughout that the media is the thing that shapes the way society will look at us. And it's so true. It's so true from the very beginning that, you know, these minstrel shows and things of that nature, that's how people were looking at Black people. And then you mentioned already other movies where it's been very clear that they look at it like, you know, like The Color Purple and say, oh, is this a depiction of all the Black people, right? Is this how all Black men will be looked at? And we can't have that. We can't have that everybody taking this one piece of media and running with it. But sometimes we just want to be in a bubble and exist. And I think that, you know, we shouldn't have to carry those burdens, but we do. And I think as Black people, we do a really good job of navigating that, even though history and Hollywood will reshape itself ever so often to rid us of those things and those big monuments that we make. You know, we'll talk about how the Blaxploitation era comes and how it eventually goes because, oh yeah, that's too much. It's not making enough money. It's too Black. We got to move in a different direction. And then that leaves a whole genre of film completely left to just dissolve and go away just because the white media said, all right, we're done with it, you know? So
yeah, it's just like before they got to Blaxploitation, but like when they talked about Carmen is one of my favorite like old school movies ever.
Carmen
like
Jones.
I will, yes,
Beyonce,
Carmen Jones.
Yes, I get it totally. No, I'm joking.
That one too. I do Carmen the hip hop, bro.
Yeah. Shenanigans.
But yes, Carmen Jones, like that movie with Dorothy Dandridge and Harry Belafonte, they said it's like one of the first like movies that's given a big production budget and full costumes and everything. And then they said like, I don't know if they considered it a Black movie. I was like, was that not a Black movie? That's a Black movie to me. But I don't know if this I don't know if the studio didn't consider it or I don't know. But anyways, I just loved how they talked about how with the rise of kind of like the light skin front lady, there was more money going towards bigger budgets, going towards, you know, bigger pieces, especially when we get like Harry Belafonte coming out, Sidney Poitier coming out and stuff like that. But then they talk about The Wiz and I was like, yes, The Wiz is right up there. And then I don't think, I think we may have talked about it on here at some point, but I didn't quite realize how much of a commercial flop The Wiz was.
Right?
Like them showing us like Ebert's like talking about it. I was like, F you, Ebert. Like you get so mad about it. Yeah. Because The Wiz is like, The Wiz is a household Black like movie. When was it Justin Simien who said that was like the first movie he ever watched? It made me think about what was the first movie I ever watched. I don't know what it is, but like The Wiz is timeless. You know what I'm saying? And it has such a cultural impact for us. And I can definitely feel comfortable talking about all Black people saying that because I mean, come on, it's The Wiz. But like saying all that and then finding out it was a commercial flop to the point of like it stopped them from putting money into Black films was so sad to hear and see.
Yeah. And I love The Wiz. I love The Wiz. Latonya, I know you do as well.
I mean, I'm probably gonna watch The Wiz after we get done talking right now, because it's on Netflix apparently. But like, yeah, that movie went quadruple platinum in our household.
Yeah.
So the idea that it didn't make enough money, make enough money back when it had that cast and like those songs and just like the trippy psychedelics of the visuals, I don't understand it. I really don't understand it. I mean, I'm sure that it also had to do with like a lack of marketing.
Of course.
Like, you know, what we see even like nowadays is that people stumble with marketing certain Black movies, or they don't get marketed at all. Like I'm thinking about, or distributed well. I'm thinking about like Ava DuVernay's Origin, which is a movie that we heard so much about like around award season, but it just didn't get released. And then all of a sudden it's on Hulu, like months after award season. And people were talking about the performances being some of the best performances of the year.
Yep, we heard they were really good.
Like, how do you not distribute and market a movie by her? But that's what happens so often to our stories. And then when it inevitably fails, because you didn't put the money or person power into like getting it off the ground, then you blame the genre or you blame Black people. And you're just like, oh, well, I guess we shouldn't make any more movies like this because no one wants to see them.
1,000% agree. Latonya, one of the first things you and I podcasted with when we first started this whole journey was Lovecraft Country. And we talked about it. And you and I were very critical of Lovecraft Country. We watched every episode and we really went through a lot of the of course, the amazing things that show gave everybody, but also, you know, we're critical of it like we would be critical of any other film. Yeah. But then they were saying, okay, well, we're not going to give it a season 2. And it completely just erases all the momentum to have more stuff like that. And they said, well, it wasn't that good. And a lot of people didn't watch it. It's like, did you market it the same way you would market this if it was a predominantly white show? And we see that predominantly white shows will often get the first season to flop. Or then they'll come back for a second season. And then they're like, oh yeah, it was the first season was kind of slow. But by season 3, I mean, it's really firing on all cylinders. Well, we don't always get a season 3, you know, when we're talking about Black shows.
Yeah, it's like we just aren't given the same room to grow as everybody else is. Like everybody else is given grace, I feel like. Yeah, people are always talking about second chances, but that's never the case when like a Black TV show or movie doesn't do as well as it's projected to do, or you know, it doesn't make its money back or make even more back than that. Like it is considered a failure of the people involved and a failure of like the just like even wanting to make anything geared toward Black people, as opposed to a failure, another like failure of the system in which all of this operates in the first place.
Yeah, and but then to me it also screams like, but when our movies do make money unexpectedly, we still don't get like what's deserved. Like I remember when Red Tails came out, what was that, 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. Like I remember people saying, we gotta go watch Red Tails, we gotta support Red Tails. This is like, I think it was like the biggest like all Black ensemble cast with biggest budget ever type thing, something like that. And I remember we went and saw it in the movie theater. It was great. It was amazing. I remember it broke a whole bunch of records, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it made back its budget. And we were like, yes, that means there's going to be more high budget Black ensemble action movies. Crickets. Like where, you know, like
even when you think about like Black Panther, a movie that made just so much money for Disney and still has a huge cultural impact, even though the star of that movie has passed away. We thought that meant, oh, okay, great. That means there's going to be more Black stories that get told in the MCU and like comic book movies in general. And no, like we've gotten the follow-up to the Black Panther, and we get like a few characters here and there, but all of the like stuff that they've rolled out for the most part, like recently, has focused on anybody but Black people, and like had made a Black person the villain of like an entire saga until he fumbled that, you know? So yeah, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like if the movie makes a lot of money and has a big cultural impact, then you celebrate it for 2 seconds because you're contractually obligated to do it. And then you move on to stuff that you can finance using that money that Black movie made. That isn't about Black people.
Yeah. I mean, episode 1 goes from the beginning of film all the way up through Sidney Poitier's contributions, Lily's in the Field, his Oscar for Best Actor, and paving the way for, like I said, a lot of leading men to go on and get nominated in these roles, because to that point, this wasn't happening. And Sidney himself was such a big deal because of the way he was depicted in many of his films once he starts directing them. You know, he starts saying from jump, if you slap me, I'm gonna slap you back in the film, you know. And I think prior to this, Black people probably didn't even know they could slap a white man, because that was something you could go to jail for. You know, that was something you could get murdered for, you could get lynched for, you know. And so to see Sidney Poitier do it, they said people were lining up down the street. I think it was Erica Alexander who said that, like, to see a white man get slapped on TV by a Black man and nothing happened, you know, and nobody dies, nobody gets, you know, lynched. It's crazy that those were the type of things that were monumental. And it was so far into the development of this country when that stuff finally started to show. By episode 2, we're talking about film and media with the backdrop of the murder of MLK, you know, and how that affected the way people were looking at film, Mari.
Yeah, episode 2 is called The Defiant Ones, and it like leads us into like us kind of taking back our power, taking back our imaging. The Sidney Poitier stuff, I love that. Like they said, like Erica Alexander said, there's no pause. It was just like, it was like reflex, like that, because that's how it would be. Yeah, but we get like Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Back and his Bad Song, or whatever, Badass Song, which I remember I had the same reaction that the one dude said. He's like, he said, I remember turning it on. I went to turn it on, and it's the opening is a sex scene, and that same thing happened to me. I was like, okay, this movie's not for me. Like, but I knew, like, I heard about like how like good it was and genre defying it was and stuff like that, but I could just never get through it. But seeing that it's that same old cycle again of like Melvin Van Peebles creates Sweet Back for Black audiences, targeted for Black audiences, where a Black man is basically getting revenge on the white people around him, and it makes so much money that then the white studios come and they gotta dumb it down, they gotta water it down, they gotta make it palatable, and this is how we got Blaxploitation. And it's just like how the minstrel shows started, where people are going to the cakewalks and seeing the enslaved people doing their cakewalks and entertaining themselves, and then it turns to minstrelsy. It's like a never-ending cycle of Black people creating things, and then our stuff being appropriated and co-opted and watered down to make money for people that are not us, mostly white people. Like, this part was the Blaxploitation part. It's always so interesting to me how people tackle Blaxploitation, because it truly is a conundrum when it comes to the films, because it's like, damn, at one point we were only like pimps, drug addicts, and you know, like drug dealers, but in the same token, we were also taking our power back in those movies. In the same token, so many actors, actresses, directors got their starts in it. In the same token, like Latonya said, we saw a lot different Black women being represented, but they were being represented in a sexual way. So now is it only are Black women used for sex? It was like, it's such a conundrum and a head fuck that like Blaxploitation films are. And I thought this documentary did a great job of maneuvering those waters.
Yeah, Latonya, the Blaxploitation moment that I remember from the series was, I guess, when they start talking about, you know, the idea of being separate, right? And saying, okay, we are no longer playing the games with you. You know, we're not going to be inclusive of everybody, you know, again, not to bring up the NAACP, but at no point are they turning around people who are not colored people. You know, there are definitely white people in the NAACP. We are always reaching across the aisle as Black folks, always trying to play nice with everyone. But during this time, it was, no, I don't care if you're a white liberal who is guilt-ridden by what just happened to MLK. You can't sit with us.
Yeah.
And they had to present this to white studios, is that this is what we're making. And so, yeah, then they go and they water it down and say, all right, you can do that. We're going to make it super flamboyant. We're going to take away all the political aspect of it. And now you have these on-screen superheroes like Shaft who are
cartoony.
Cartoony, slapping people, singing songs and stuff like that. And it really does step away from the message so much to where, yeah, they were able to make money off of it, but without highlighting the reason why it was made.
Did they say Shaft saved the studio, MGM? Yeah, right?
Yeah. I think it was Shaft. Yeah, saved MGM.
Yep. Amazing.
And then they it was like a reporter or journalist that coined the term blaxploitation to refer to just a few films that he had seen that put Black people in a bad light, but did not represent the whole genre of like Black movies and was not political in any way, which is really interesting because like to depoliticize or attempt to depoliticize Blackness is almost impossible. Like it's
literally impossible.
I don't know how you do that.
You cannot do that. It's inherently impossible to separate Blackness from politics because we would not have rights if not for the politics side of it. We were not just placed here with rights. We had to fight for them. So yeah, I think you're 100% correct. You just can't just separate those two things.
No. And then for movies like Uptight to have footage that was actually like shot during like the funeral or gatherings for Martin Luther King Jr., having that archival footage and having discussions that you mentioned earlier, Chappell, about like what is the role of like white people within movements and like what is allyship and when is it helpful and when is it not helpful. That like those are things that I don't even think people had terms for then, but like they were having those discussions on film, which is wild. Like those discussions don't happen in like everyday life, but somehow they were having those discussions on film. I will say there's some blaxploitation that I feel like I can't live without personally. Blackula is one of those movies.
It's so weird though. It's so
it is so weird. Supremely odd. Like it doesn't make any damn sense. But it's vampires. You know how much I love horror. It's a vampire named Blackula. That is the funniest shit ever.
Sounds like our October content is being placed right in front of us. Halloween, we talking about Blackula.
Please.
I'm gonna get you, suckers. Like one of my favorite.
I love that movie. The goldfish and the shoes.
Yeah,
it's like such a great moment.
Right. But also not doing what we needed to do politically that, you know, like really far away from where it started, you know, which was the goal there, you know, to say, all right, we're going to take that out. But it was another thing that we just embraced as Black people where, okay, that's not our lane anymore. It's not political, but look at all these roles we have now. And so you have so many people stepping into these roles and y'all talked about The Wiz. We do not have enough time to talk about The Wiz here on this podcast because I could do it for hours, scene by scene, line by line. I love it so much. But you have this amazing star-studded cast that doesn't make the money that you put into it. And they say, all right, we ain't doing that no more. And so we move toward independent filmmaking for Black people. And this was a part that I had no clue. I was today years old when I learned all about this. Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep. I want to watch this movie so bad. Like I was legit like, okay, when I finish this, the same way Latonya said she's going to go watch The Wiz, I need to go watch this because apparently it's a metaphor for Black children being led to the slaughter. In the movie, it's a guy named Stan. He works at a slaughterhouse in Watts, LA, and the slaughters affect his home and his kids. But it just goes like different like episodic views of him dealing with different things that will basically show him that he has an inability to affect his life, right? And that he's basically trapped in whatever this life situation he is. But it was not fantastical. It was not a story of oppression and like him breaking some cycle through some monologue. He wasn't a civil rights leader. He was, you know, it was just existing. And they talked about it in such with such reverence, I think. And I found out that the budget was like $10,000 to make it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that
And
really
he made
spoke
it on
to me.
weekends. Like
Yeah.
every weekend of the year, he just shot this movie.
Yeah.
What?
Mari,
Like,
yeah. Mari, what did you think about William Greaves basically creating reality TV?
That was so that part was so funny to me. I was like, wait, so what is so I was like, so he's shooting a film, but he's shooting the filming of the filming. And he was getting and those are like the genuine reactions of the crew. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. That made me want to definitely watch that as well. And then I was wondering, I was like, wait, so was the thing that they were filming, was that an actual film too? Like was that an actual
Where's the film of the film that they were filming? Exactly.
That was good. Watching Ava try and work that out was hilarious. Yeah.
But the subject matter, he's like, watch me make a film. But this is watch me make a film as a Black man leading a large staff of white people. And we get to see their legitimate reactions to what it looks like when a Black man is in power over them in a world where he has creative control and they mutiny. And we have it on film. We know it's like the quiet part is being said aloud and we're recording it. And then it gets released as a movie. Symbiotoxicoplasm, take 1, Latonya.
I mean, yes. Like, I'm going to name a pet that.
What is that?
CPTP.
Right.
Yeah, that was wild. I had never heard of that before. Because when you think about like experimental film or indie filmmaking, you hardly, like, rarely ever think of Black creators, just because that space is not, like, Black people aren't spoken about as being in that space. But then if you think about what indie film is and like the small budgets that they're working with, then Black filmmakers are almost always indie filmmakers because they just aren't given as big of a budget as most people are, or they don't work with studios until it's time to get things distributed anyway. So that was all really interesting. Like, that combined with like Killer of Sheep, like that's a combination of the invention of cinema verite and then the invention of reality TV. And I would never have known that those
Black people did it.
Black people did that if it hadn't been for this documentary.
Yeah, in this documentary, we got the world's first Soul Train line. Mari, my mouth was on
the floor. Yes, that was so cool. Like, what is happening? Like, where did all of this history come from that's like caught on tape, documented, yet we know nothing about it? If there's nothing more about this, like, I hope Hollywood in Black is distributed to all film classes around the US. Like, honestly, because I learned so much. I was like, I am learning so much in such an entertaining way. And seeing the first Soul Train line on TV on film is hilarious. And it shows that we really have not been serious. We've been so unserious for so long.
Unserious forever. I mean, even the idea that a Black man wore blackface to make a movie,
wild,
you know, but also a Black man wore whiteface to play a Black man.
Yeah.
We did it first, Robert Downey Jr.
I was just about to say.
So we get to the more modern era, and it's weird to me to say this is the more modern era when I know there's like 40 years between what I'm about to talk about and now. I'm a fossil. We talk about my dog, Richard Pryor, and everything that he brings to film through his comedy, being what the first comedian to have a live in concert film, doing stand-up and paving the way for people like Dave Chappelle and ultimately Eddie Murphy, who again, we talk about here on this very podcast. I think me and Ty on the Nothing But Netflix podcast, Ty and I talked about Axel F, and we dropped that podcast in the Recap Kickback feed. So if you subscribe to the audio feed, you would have seen that as well, because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna talk about Eddie Murphy and it not go on Recap Kickback. I don't care if I do work for another podcast, it's got to come here. But seeing them give Richard Pryor his flowers and then from there talk about the legacy of Eddie Murphy. I got emotional, but not from like a sad place. I don't do like cry tears of sadness, but when I get really happy, oh God, the level of euphoria I get from seeing Black people do cool stuff. I'm like, oh man, this is so dope. And so I love all of this, Mari.
Yeah, same. Like it truly was like, dang, I gotta go watch all these Eddie Murphy movies because like I want to. Yeah, it's like it was so good. Seeing Richard Pryor get his flowers and be talked about. I wasn't expecting it, and to see it was amazing. The flow, that flow is a little suspect though when they were like, oh, Richard Pryor couldn't really talk about his sexuality. Cut to Eddie Murphy. I was like, that's shady. But
they wanted to look. I know Justin Simien was like, hey, hold on, Richard. You know, yeah, Richard. Okay, yeah. I feel like Justin might have put his thumb on the scale a little bit there.
He didn't have to do all that. But Coming to America, we've talked about it here on the Recap Kickback. One of my favorite movies ever. It was. I'm pretty sure it was our number one on Black comedic movies. Had to be.
Mm-hmm.
Had to be. And Eddie Murphy putting out banger after banger after banger. Like, we've grown up with Eddie Murphy. That's crazy. Like you said, it makes you like so emotional because you're like, this is stuff that I remember. This is stuff that I have a nostalgic connection to. And this man was putting out so much. And he was a Black man who like is a big comedian doing this. He's like one of the first like comedians to make that transition to big box office actor. And you kind of don't realize the historical significance of it when it's something you've grown up with your whole entire life, you know.
Mm-hmm. If you had asked me the historical significance of, I don't know, Harlem Nights, I've been like, man, that's one of my favorite Black movies of all time. But then when you really think about the cast, everybody who's included in that film and where they end up being as far as like names, it's incredible that we don't talk about Harlem Nights more. I mean, we even messed up the name on our rankings. We were like Harlem Nights or is this the other one? You know, so it's like, yeah, I forgot what we got mixed up with something else. I forget.
It was New Jack City. That's what I thought it was. You guys thought it. Yeah.
It was a long day that day. I'll just say that. That was funny. Yeah, so they highlight all these big films that I know and that I love, and that they show like now at this point in history, we're making Black films for us and by us. You know, we have the directors that are now coming in and directing Black films for us and that we can enjoy in our own kind of Black cinematic universe. You know, it's where they're no longer reacting to whiteness around them. They're just living in their Black bubble. White people exist, but they're not the main part of the story. And I've never looked at film like that. Like when I watch Soul Food, for instance, every character in the movie is Black, but I never once think, what are the white people doing? You know, what I wonder what was the white people at when Soul Food was going on? You know, it just doesn't occur to me, especially because I guess it reflects kind of my background. I did not grow up around white people. I was in the area where they didn't really like to move to. And so for me, it was normal to just be surrounded by Black people all the time. It wasn't until I started watching bigger movies and more popular TV shows, I realized like, damn, they're not really showing us a lot here. You know, I didn't know I was missing it until I started to watch more white media. So it was really interesting to see this.
Was it Boomerang that somebody said like, where are all the white people
who's running the
advertising office?
Yeah, they're in the office. Who's in charge?
I love Boomerang. We've talked about that before already though. But like I never thought that. I never saw that Black ass advertising space and thought, where are the white people? That's insane to me.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff was normalized for us. You know, it starts with Boomerang, but Mari, one of your favorite television shows is Living Single. And at no point am I thinking, Khadijah don't got enough white employees here. You know, white folks there. You know, Flavor don't got enough salt. You know, like
tell me you all podcast together all the time without
Gary that.
I'll give her that. I'll give her that one, Latonya. Latonya, were there any movies that stood out to you in the modern age that they talked about, or even that they didn't talk about, that really shaped the way, or just like that you grew up watching these movies and TV shows?
I mean, Mari talked a little bit about it, but like my very favorite movie going experience of my entire life was going to see Coming to America downtown. I don't remember what movie theater we went to, but my dad was in town, which never happened. Like one of I think the 2 times that my dad came to visit me when I was little. And me, my mom, my dad, and my aunt all went to go see the movie. And then afterwards we went to like fireworks in Grant Park. Never experienced anything like that before and or since. Like that was a movie that really showcased just like how talented Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall were, and like Eddie Murphy playing all those different characters and like all those elaborate sets and costumes. Like that was when I one of the times when I was young that I realized I want to watch and talk about movies, I think, for the rest of my life. I'm trying to see what else.
I remember going to see Vampire in Brooklyn in theaters.
Yeah. Give me Vampire in Brooklyn over Dracula. Maury, my aunt had one of those, those black art kind of pictures where it's like the strong black woman and the strong black man hugging and the flowing in the way. Like my aunt had one, and it was this woman. She was hugging a black man, a black woman. She had long hair. It was like an afro. And he was facing what you would and his eyes were just so serious. And I swear I walked in, I was a little kid, and I was like, oh God, it's Vampire in Brooklyn. I swear I thought I was get away from her. Terrified of Vampire in Brooklyn. I think that the series highlights one of my favorite movies of all time. I know they're not a real singing group, but the 5 Heartbeats.
Oh, the 5 Heartbeats.
Cannot stress enough.
Oh, Robert Townsend.
Robert Townsend, the man you are. You have given me so much with just that movie. Okay, everybody in my family can quote that movie. We know every song. We know every line. When I was a kid, we used to assign roles. Nah, you this person, you this person, you this person. We had it down pat. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the other movie. That's the Temptations. You can't.
Oh you can't I always forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot. My bad.
See, that's where they get you. But seeing them talk about it was another highlight for me. The Last Dragon as well. My cousins were they swore they could do karate because they saw The Last Dragon.
My brother loves it.
It's one of those movies where it's we didn't know that we could do these things until we saw it on film.
Yeah.
And I think that covers most of the things. Of course, we can't end without talking about Spike Lee.
Yeah.
Gotta talk about Spike, man.
I mean, it's wild that he made that movie in response to The Color Purple.
Yeah, she's
got to have it in response to The Color Purple, and then just never quit. Just didn't stop after that. And all of the the talent that he's had pass through his movies. I was really excited to see a very young Giancarlo Esposito just in the movie with Eddie Murphy, Trading Places, and then in Do the Right Thing. I was like, oh wow, this man really has been a part of our lives forever on screen.
Yeah.
I loved learning about Giancarlo Esposito's background because I've seen Do the Right Thing, but I also did not know that this man is half Italian. I do not know that about him until I find these things out reading.
It makes so much sense now.
Yeah, and so
I thought it was Spanish.
I do. Because he's always playing Latin.
He's always speaking Spanish. He's always speaking Spanish. I wonder too, back in the day when he showed up and was like, "I'm black," I know they made fun of him. I know they did. They was on Giancarlo's ass because they're like, "You sure?" But seeing how that reflected his real life and how he approached the role. I'm sorry. I really loved it. It made me want to go watch Do the Right Thing again. Mari, do you have a favorite Spike Lee joint?
Oh yeah, it's School Days, hands down. It's School Days. I went to Howard. I went to HBCU. I watched it again at my HBCU. They play it for us freshman week. They say everybody to the auditorium.
Watch School
Days. Yeah.
What about you, Latonya?
I mean, I really love School Days as well, but I think a movie that really kind of speaks to a lot of what the early part of the first episode was about was the movie Bamboozled. just like these people like intentionally start putting on a minstrel show, and it becomes like one of the most highly rated TV shows, like amongst white audiences, essentially. And they have to face like the repercussions of doing that, and to like learn about all of, you know, like having to use like burnt cork to like make your face black, even though you're already black, and like having to do the double consciousness thing that you talked about earlier, Chappell. Like, there's just so many themes in that movie that resonate with just the Black filmmaking experience that I was thinking about it during the entirety, and I was kind of surprised they didn't bring that one up in particular, but thinking about it during the entirety of the Spike Lee discussion.
Yeah, they talked about Hollywood Shuffle a little bit, which is kind of similar. But no, they didn't bring up Bamboozle. I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, it's funny because I'm probably going to surprise y'all with my favorite Spike Lee joint, but it has never changed since the first time I saw this movie, and it's ridiculous, and it probably will, if you think about it, you're probably like, that sounds about right. Mo Better Blues. I'm sorry. You see, yeah, okay. Yeah. I love that movie since the first time I saw it. It's another one of those moments where I felt represented on screen. I was a little kid, but I was in the band and I played an instrument, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, if this is like a realistic path for me, I ended up going to college on a band scholarship, like playing the trombone. Wow. But I started on the trumpet. And so like Mo Better Blues was really something that I saw it and it stuck with me. It just was one of those things I never got out of my head. And so even the glimpse of Denzel Washington with that trumpet that we got in this series, it just made my heart smile. I was like, oh man, we got to talk about Mo Better Blues one day on Recap Kickback.
You know, something that I just like remembered and looking at his filmography that he directed that had a huge impact on me when I was very young is The Women of Brewster Place.
Yes, my mama used to watch that movie all the time. That
movie is
Crooklyn. Yeah.
Yes, Crooklyn. The Women of Brewster Place was like one of those. I think it was like, was it a movie or was it a mini series?
It was a series, but it used to come on TV back to back to back.
It did, and we recorded it. We recorded it one time when it came on back to back, and it was just so like, you know, like we were still living in the projects at that time. And like, so were the people in that movie. There was just so much happening in that movie that felt so familiar to me that it was like watching my family go through all that stuff.
The who's of cast too. We got Oprah Winfrey. Oh, did I say Winfrey? Jesus, Oprah Winfrey. I know, I'm tired. Robin Gibbons, Jackie Harry, like Leon.
Lynn Whitfield.
Lynn,
yeah.
I remember getting out of the way
Tyson.
when this movie was on. I remember like my mom would be watching the movie, and my aunts would come over and stuff like that, and it would be on, and I'm like, let me get out of the way. You know, it was just one of those movies where like they're gonna be sitting here right for a minute, you know.
For a while. It's long.
Yeah. It's two parts, but again, since it came on TV, you didn't get uninterrupted. So you're watching it with commercials and all kinds of stuff, but it would just be like a whole viewing experience for me. Again, and it was more like what you were saying, Latonya, where I would watch the movie, but it was more like I was just watching the things that I have like 6 aunts, you know, I would be watching what they do, you know. And so that's a very good one. Man, I almost forgot about. I mean, I guess I did.
About that one.
Yeah, so good.
I think you would like it, Mari. It's a bit of a commitment, but I mean, I say that because we recorded it from the TV and
right. I'm sure if you watch it online, it's like 20 minutes. And right now, I think that's
58 minutes.
2 hours and 58 minutes. Yeah, it was long. It was long, especially back, you know, it was with commercials. A 2-week showing. Yeah.
Oh, God.
The first 2 parts, we've covered almost everything in the first 2 parts. We do have parts 3 and 4 coming, but we won't be able to talk about that until episode 4 drops, which will be in about a week. And so we will probably take a break from Hollywood Black, but we are definitely going to finish talking about it because it was so much fun discussing this. Before we go, I do want to ask one of the questions that the film posits, and I probably should have started with this. Latonya, I'll start with you. What is a Black film to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that question when they asked the question. I would say that it's a film that has Black people like on every line, so like above the line, underline as well. So like the writers, the director or directors, the cast, and that it focuses in some way on just like Black people living their lives. It doesn't have to be anything fantastical. It doesn't have to be like depressing in any way and like stem from tragedy. But I think of it as like anything where like a Black story is forefronted. But that also opens the floodgates for like a lot of other movies that were directed by white people. Like, you know, we talked about Carmen Jones, The Color Purple, like
Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, the movie that was directed by Sidney Lumet, The Wiz, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's Lena Horne's son.
Which is wild. Like that took me aback a little bit too when Jenny Lumet was like, yeah, that's my grandmother. And I was like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard question to answer because I feel like all of cinema owes itself to Black people. So you could also very well say that like any movie is a Black movie.
Any movie with Black people in it.
Is that how you feel, Mari? What defines a Black movie to you?
No, it's hard, right? Because you do want to give the stipulation of they got to be behind the scenes as well. But if you do that, then you lose a lot of good Black media. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think that's important now. And I think there's more of a push now for that to be the case. But for me, I think anything that predominantly centers a Black all Black cast or majority Black cast, should I say. I don't want to say something based on a Black experience because just by the nature of us going through life, that is a Black experience. So I think, just mostly the predominantly Black cast telling a story that centers Blackness, basically.
That's tough because I think of so many movies that mean a lot to me, and a lot of them just have one Black character, and it might just be the main character. I'm thinking like White Man Can't Jump is a Black movie. I don't care what nobody says. You know, it is a Black movie. It just is. And Woody Harrelson is there, but it's a Black movie. And to me, like I think it's more about how it resonates with me. I think that you could tell a story. You could have a Black character, very much like Latonya was talking about with Zendaya in The Challengers. That's a Black woman. She's in The Challengers. I don't think that's a Black movie. It didn't resonate with me and my Blackness. Now, it might have resonated with somebody else's Blackness, but not me. So to me, that's not a Black movie. The story itself has to speak to me. And I think Black people can have a vast reality. Like there's so many spaces, but if it feels inauthentic, then I can't claim it. And I think that's the one thing to me. You can tell whatever story you want, but it's got to be Black and it's got to be real. And I think for me, if it don't feel real, I just won't touch it. And so it's such a layered question, a loaded question, and a really hard one to answer. And everybody's going to have a different answer for that probably. But we can explore most of that when we come back to talk about episodes 3 and 4. Until then, Latonya, what do you have going on?
Well, I was recently a guest of Crime Scene podcast with Mari and Sarah, five timers club, everybody. That's me. Trying to make it to 10. But we talked about the documentary that was recently released on Netflix called Daughters, which if you all have not seen Daughters, first of all, get a giant, like oversized box of tissues. Because you will need them. Like that's the first time I ever cried on a podcast. That was a mess.
It was a group therapy session, basically. Yeah,
everybody but Mari cried, which is why I said Mari's made.
I had to lead the charge. I had to hold the ship. I was steering the ship.
But yeah, you can catch me on there. Then I'll be on the Movie Ladder podcast this week talking about Anatomy of a Fall as well. Ooh. And yeah, back here at Recap Kickback, hopefully soon to finish out this series. And then you can find me on Twitter at LK Starks, where I'll be telling you all what I'm up to next, and on Instagram at Stormborn1222.
All right. And Mari, what do you have going on?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter at Mari Talks Too Much, like the number 2, talking all things Big Brother over there. I'm dipping in and out of Big Brother 26 coverage with RHAP. So just check out my Twitter so you'll know where to catch me if you want to hear me talk about Big Brother. Like Latonya said, our crime scene episode just dropped this week where we covered Daughters. Daughters is on Netflix. It's an hour and 48 minutes, I believe, Latonya. It is right up the Recap Kickback audience's alley. It is about a group of men who are incarcerated and how they join a program where they get to see their daughters. They get to go to a daddy-daughter dance. After a 10-week program, they get to participate in a daddy-daughter dance where they get to like literally physically touch and dance with their daughters. And the documentary follows the incarcerated men and their daughters. And it's particularly 4 daughters that the film follows over a 8-year period, I believe. So it is such a good documentary. And like Latonya said, it is so heart-wrenching. Like the tears will flow. So definitely check it out over on Netflix, Daughters on Netflix, and then come to Crime Scene by going to robhasawebsite.com/crime feed in order to subscribe to listen to me, Latonya, Sarah, and our guest Chantel Francis talk about it. It was very emotional, so definitely go check it out for us.
You don't need to watch the video. You don't need to listen to the podcast.
That's why we don't record video over on Crime Scene. Just listen to the podcast. Yes. So yeah. And that's it for me. Yep.
And as far as programming here on Recap Kickback, like I said, we got a lot of stuff coming your way. We got AJ Norris's return to Recap Kickback next week. We also have more Tyrone. I think we also have we got a few things in store. So just make sure you're subscribed so that you can see all of that and more here on Recap Kickback on our YouTube page. And of course, on the audio only, if you recapkickback.com/subscribe, you can get all of that information. And then if you want to catch me in other places, I'm still talking about Below Deck on RHAP, still talking about Netflix shows on the Nothing But Netflix podcast with Rob Sestonino. I'm talking about Big Brother on RHAP. It's mid-season and it's about a third of the season through, and we keeping it sloppy over there. Every week I'm talking about the slop with Rob behind the patron paywall, and then every now and then Mari and I will pop up on offshoot recap here and there to talk about the episodes. So if you're a fan of any of that, if you're a fan of Latonya, Mari, or myself, make sure you tune into all of our plugs. Follow us all on social media at LK Starks, at Mari Talks Too Much, and at Recap Kickback to keep up with everything we have going. Until next time, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here. Peace out. Talk to y'all later.